Well, welcome everybody, welcome friends, and welcome if you're here for the first time and if you're here for the 500th time. When I was thinking about 500th, I was thinking actually there will be a number of people in this group who've been attending the Armadale meditation group for more than enough time to have notched up 500 times here together. And we're all here in one way or another because we know that it can be challenging at times, as Amanda was talking about, to ride the waves of life, the ups and downs. It's not straightforward to meet all the challenges with grace, with care, with presence. And coming together, being here together helps us to do that. It's part of developing that capacity. We need good friends to support ourselves on the path, to strengthen our balance as we surf those waves of life. So the coming together of people with such good intentions supports us all. So thanks for being here. As you know, we're the Armadale Meditation Group of Buddhist Society of Western Australia, meeting now online for several years since COVID. And we're coming towards the end of the 3-month period where we have lay teachers who teach. 9 months of the year, we have the monks from Bodhinyana Monastery come and teach us. Each night that we join together on a Tuesday, or I'm guessing it's some other time, Tuesday morning, I guess, for other people, we have an hour and a half, 30 minutes approximately of introduction, 30 minutes approximately of meditation, and 30 minutes approximately of questions and answers. As you know from Marlene's email, I'm Kathryn, and I'll be the teacher tonight. We start the night every time chanting the Buddha's words on loving kindness. And tonight, Gloria has agreed to do that for us. Thank you, Gloria. And in a moment, but not just yet, Marlene, Marlene will put up the words. We can all chant along together. We will be on mute, but Gloria will unmute herself at the time. Before Gloria does that, and Gloria's also going to do say a few words I understand before she does it. Is there something in the room that you're in that softens your heart? So I'm asking that to get you to prime us to feel in the direction of loving kindness. Each week I've looked for different ways to do this because the magic, the transformation of the heart-mind comes in moving closer to the feeling of loving kindness more than in the automatic recitation of the words. When I was looking around my room, it really struck me how lucky I am. There are a number of things that soften this heart. And over there, I've got a plant which has been growing for years in this room. I've got a beautiful craft piece that a 3-year-old made me. Up there, you might be able to see behind me paintings that my father did. He's 90 on Friday and still painting. There's only so many paintings, though, that I can fit in my house. So I think I'm about at the limit. But the thing I chose, and I'm going to show you, and I asked my partner if he's okay with me using this and showing you, is a photo of my partner when he was about 3, I'm guessing. And whenever I look at this, he was curious about why I might show that to you. Whenever I look at it, it's such a beautiful photo of innocence and sweetness. It just melts my heart. So there might be something in your area that moves your heart, that opens your heart, that softens your heart. When I was up on Saturday night at Bodhinyana Monastery at the Sutta class that Ajahn Brahmali gives every Saturday during Rains Retreat, One of the people there at the end of the class asked him about the power of chanting a particular sutta. In the commentaries, it says it's a very powerful sutta to chant. And Ajahn Brahmali was very clear that the most important thing is what's in the heart mind as we chant. The words may help us to generate that, but the words themselves, if we're doing it on automatic pilot, don't have the power that we obtain when we're feeling kindness in our heart. So a bit of a blurb before we start. And also I just want to name that sometimes how we're feeling for all sorts of reasons that we didn't necessarily choose, how we're feeling right now might not be open and loving and kind. And if that's the case, please know it's completely fine. We actually don't choose our mind states. We have a little bit of choice of how we respond to them. But if loving kindness is not part of what you're feeling right now, no worries. We'll just give it our best shot and let that be good enough. Okay, I'm going to be quiet now and hand over to Gloria.
To each one of you who may be experiencing any kind of difficulties or struggling in life right now, may you be well, happy and peaceful, and may you be safe. Thank you for being here, and I am always very grateful about being able to be part of this group, because this group has brought me a lot of joy and happiness. And I hope everyone is always well. And I hope I can dedicate this chanting to all of you. And I hope I can hold each one of you in my heart when I do this chanting. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety. May all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born. May all beings be happy. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, free from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding, by not holding to fixed wills, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being free from all sense desires, is not born again into this world.
Thank you very much, Gloria. That was really lovely. And a really lovely introduction. It certainly helped each of us feel that we were sitting a little bit in your heart as you chanted that. So for each of the 4 weeks that I'm teaching, and tonight is the fourth of those, the meditation that we'll be doing is connected to one of the foundations of mindfulness. Tonight, being the fourth week, we are at the fourth foundation of mindfulness, which is mindfulness of Dhammas, sometimes translated as mental objects. If you've been here for the previous weeks, you'll know that we've been looking at, firstly, mindfulness of the body. Second week, mindfulness of feeling tone or Vedana, whether an experience is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. The third week, last week, we looked at mindfulness of mind, heart. And this week, mindfulness of Dhammas, or mental objects. Now, just reminding us all that the Satipatthana Sutta, which is the foundations of mindfulness, is a sutta that goes into much more detail than we're able to touch on here. So it's just really, if you like, a nod in the direction of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So please follow up yourself if you're interested in finding out more, do some more reading. And particularly the 4th foundation of mindfulness is quite involved. And so I am only going to refer to it in general terms. There are different versions of the Satipatthana Sutta, and Bhikkhu Anālio, who I've been leaning on in my reading around this, has done a comparative analysis of the different versions of the suttas. And what he includes in this 4th foundation of mindfulness of Dhammas, is the hindrances and the awakening factors. Those 2 only. Other versions have more things that are included. And just to remind us, the hindrances, they're basically those things that arise in the mind, that cause suffering to us and others, that get in the way of freedom. And there are 5 of them: sensual desire, anger, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry, and doubt. And if you were here last week, you'll see there's a bit of an overlap with some of the things that we were talking about last week as well in mindfulness of mind, heart. And then, so that's the hindrances, one aspect of mindfulness of Dhammas. And the second aspect is the awakening factors, which are those qualities of the mind that support freedom from suffering. And there's 7 of those: mindfulness, investigation, energy, joy, tranquility, concentration, and what Bhikkhu Anālio talks about as equipoise or equanimity. So in this 4th foundation of mindfulness, if we think of this mind as a garden that we are cultivating, we're looking to learn what creates a beautiful garden. Because it's nice to hang out in a beautiful garden. And our garden of the mind might need some weeds removed, some hindrances removed. Our garden of the mind might need some fertilizer, some compost put on what we want to cultivate, the awakening factors. in general terms, this foundation of mindfulness helps us to grow wholesome or skillful mind states and to inhibit the activity of the unwholesome. And as I'm talking, you might just check in with your mind right now. Check in as to whether the conditions are present for the mind to be free from unwholesome mind states or not. So we're looking at some of the conditions that might underlie these mind states. Whether the conditions are present for the mind to be moving in the direction of awakening or freedom. And when we talk about the conditions that might be present for each of us, that includes conditions well beyond what's happening right now. Our mind-heart has been formed and is affected by experiences that we've had stretching way back in the past. Those past experiences have conditioned how we think about things, the beliefs we have, the automatic reactions that we develop to every experience that we have. And I think it's useful to remember that we don't choose those conditions, those experiences for the large part. One important condition that we all share, I think pretty much, that supports the mind to be clear, open, loving, balanced, is that everybody here has set aside this time to be here and to investigate what it is to have this mind-heart, to bring to this experience care and understanding. So we're cultivating those capacities, and we're showing up with interest, with good intentions. So those are really positive conditions for the mind heart now, and we're surrounded by friends. I'm indicating to my screen, but I should go like this. You know, if you're in gallery view, you know, we're surrounded, because I'll be one icon of many. We're surrounded by friends who are here, showing up, helping us, who also value this path of purifying the mind. So there are some helpful conditions for all of us as to what mind state we'll have right now. But I've got no idea what your particular day has been like, whether you're exhausted from the stuff of life that you've had to deal with, and you might actually be quite depleted. So the inner resources that you have to meet whatever shows up might be limited. So it's useful to cut ourselves some slack, to bring some understanding if that is the case. We bring to this moment, whether we like it or not, the effects of our history, and that's a personal history, you know, what happened in our family of origin, but also the history of our culture, of our society, of the economic situation, of the environmental situation. All of those conditions are part of how we meet this moment. But here we're taking responsibility for our mind heart so that that history isn't our destiny. And it's a slow process of learning, of exploration, of investigation, of cultivation. How we respond when we check in with our mind and find an unskillful mind state, one that will cause us and others suffering. It depends on lots of different factors. And in particular, when we aren't mindful, we will react to that in a way that's very automatic, no reflection. We're likely to add fuel to the fire, The mind can spin in different stories about the situation. You know, we can get up on our high horses about being right, or the opposite, get down into the ditch about being wrong and bad. Those automatic ways that we've been practicing for years will arise when we aren't mindful. And they can arise sometimes even when we aren't mindful, depending on the intensity of it. You know, we generally will shoot first and ask questions later when we are on automatic pilot without mindfulness being established well. The third foundation of mindfulness that we looked at last week invites us to know the mind state that's present. And to know the mind state that's present, we have to pause from whatever's going on that we might be caught up in. When we pause and know an unskillful mind state, without anything more, there is a change in the mind. There's a change in the awareness. And sometimes that's enough. It's a new condition, and that's enough so that we can shift out of an unskillful mind state. If we can pause when we notice the arising of an unwholesome mind state, maybe it's the beginning of some internal complaint about something, you know, wow, why did they, blah, 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 why does she, you know, another person, the government, whatever it is. If we pause when we notice that arising and the intensity of the mind state isn't too strong, that mindfulness is enough to move us out of the grip of the unwholesome mind state. Where the mind state, unwholesome mind state, is strong and been going on for longer and it's more entrenched, we might need a different response. What can happen when we wake up in the middle of a more intense, unwholesome mind state? And good examples of those would be anger, shame, fear, is that we want to change it. We know it's not good for us. It feels unpleasant. We're tight, we're contracted, and the first reaction that we often will have is to get rid of it. We can try all sorts of strategies to move from unpleasant into pleasant, a more open, gentle mindset. That's what we want. And that approach is frequently doomed because we have tried to bypass the third foundation of mindfulness, the step that asks us not to turn away, but rather to get to know the mind state. That's needed first. And I had a great, if somewhat humbling, completely humbling experience of that while I was on retreat last month. On the whole, my mind was in a pretty stable, settled state for most of the retreat. I was on retreat for about a month. And gee, that's pleasant. I liked that. But one afternoon, my mind was really quite agitated, unsettled. And it was that way for quite a period of time. It had been going on for some hours. And I was sick and tired of this mind. Any attempts to meditate just brought me closer to what I didn't want, closer contact with this agitated mind. So my mind wants to change it. It's looking for ways to change this mind, to get away from this unpleasant mind state. So I tried all sorts of techniques. I know, loving kindness. I'll do some loving kindness meditation. That'll solve this problem of this mind. Didn't. I know. I'm going to go and sit in the meditation hall and look at the Buddha statue. And I'd spent quite a lot of time developing a positive relationship with the Buddha statue, as I mentioned in the very first talk. Didn't work. I know, I'll go for a walk in the bush. That didn't work. Nothing was working that I was trying. The mind is still agitated. I still don't like it. So my next strategy. Okay, I'm at the Jhana Grove Retreat Centre. I decided I'd walk 15 minutes to Bodhinyana Monastery, and I'd meditate in the meditation hall there, obviously hoping to get rid of this agitated mind state. I appreciate the walk to the monastery. It's a pleasant walk. I like the meditation hall down at the monastery. It's a lovely place to meditate. So I'm really hoping that this technique, this strategy will transform this annoying mind. And as I'm walking down to the monastery along the lovely bush path, the mind is still agitated. And for the first time, this is the humbling bit, for the first time since that agitation had begun, I became aware of the aversion to the experience. Now, I've been naming my aversion to you, but I hadn't brought it into awareness. And it feels quite astonishing to me now. And I can remember feeling at the time, like, how could have I missed seeing this aversion? I'd been so caught in wanting the mind to be pleasant, to go back to the mind states I'd been having for the weeks before, that I hadn't paused and acknowledged the aversion that was so clear. And the aversion, of course, was because the mind state was unpleasant. An agitated mind is unpleasant. Unpleasant feeling tone, second foundation of mindfulness. When I became aware of that aversion, it made sense that all these techniques to escape were doomed. The aversion, these attempts to escape, the annoyance, the getting rid of, that wanting something different was getting in the way of meeting the agitation more skillfully. Now, that is the job of aversion. Aversion at a biological level is here to protect us from unpleasant experiences. Aversion keeps us away from danger. But when the unpleasant experience is a mind state, the effect of the aversion is to increase the unpleasantness, and we get into a downward spiral. Seeing that clearly as I'm walking along to the monastery was just so helpful. And I dropped all of the trying to change the experience. I was able to acknowledge, okay, so right now, the mind is pretty crazy and agitated, and I don't like it. So just that simple acknowledgement of this is how it is. I can't remember the first time I heard that phrase, this is how it is like this. Simple acceptance of what was going on in the mind transformed the experience. So all the trying, all the kicking and screaming and shouting that the mind had been doing, trying to get rid of it, to no avail. What was useful was to actually accept this is what's going on. And it transformed the experience into something which was a lot lighter, a lot easier. The whole resistance to the experience was dropped. My mind was still a bit unsettled, but there wasn't the fight with what was going on in the mind. So that acknowledgement of the mind state without judgment, in that case and in many other cases that I've practiced with, just enables a lightness and also the possibility of some understanding and care, self-compassion to arise, rather than that manipulative attempts to bring loving kindness to stomp on this and change the situation. It's a much more genuine response to the mind. And you'll remember, if you were here in the first week, that I'd taken into the retreat an intention to be aware of preferences and to see if I could minimize those preferences. So, you know, I had to laugh at myself about how blinded I'd been to the preferences as they were playing out in that particular situation on that afternoon. A bit of agitation in the mind, and I'd been caught. Yes, I'd been caught, and the unpleasantness from the agitation conditioning a form of craving. The aversion is another form of craving, wanting something different, wanting this to end. And of course, we know that craving sits under suffering. So I'd been increasing my suffering for the last few hours. And I think that's why the second and third foundations of mindfulness are so powerful. They're all powerful, but to be able to bring simple acknowledgement and acceptance and understanding of whatever the situation is, just takes away that very normal reaction, additional layer of difficulty that's caused by resistance and aversion. And just to also highlight that again, I'm not talking here about situations which threaten our personal safety. In those kinds of situations, fight or flight might be the best option. Here I'm talking about how we deal with the unwholesome mind states that we will encounter. So the encouragement here is, you know, should you ever encounter an unwholesome mind state, it might happen, not to jump over that first important step of pausing and knowing the body, knowing the feeling tone, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, knowing the mind-heart state. The fourth foundation of mindfulness asks us to contemplate what the conditions are to bring about unwholesome qualities, mind states, and what the conditions are that support qualities of mind that lead to awakening. So we're looking at, we're investigating conditionality as well here. But first we actually have to see what's going on. That's really important. Before we do, I'm just looking at the time, the meditation tonight, I will read just a few descriptions of the mind that are in the Dhammapada, which is a collection of sayings of the Buddha. And when I was reading, so I read this on retreat, they really helped highlight the reality of having a human mind. It's difficult. It's a tricky thing to live with. I'm going to paraphrase some of these ways. It's from chapter 3 of the Dhammapada, which is about the mind. And so these are some of the descriptions of the human mind. And this one I'll read first connects very much to the experience I was describing a minute ago of having an agitated mind. So here it is. The mind is as a fish when pulled out of water and put on the land. It throbs and quivers. That's how a mind is when it's agitated. A mind is fickle, unreliable, and unsteady, so difficult to guard. A mind is difficult to subdue, ever swift, quick, and seizing whatever it desires. A mind is difficult to detect and extremely subtle, seizing whatever it desires. The mind without form wanders far and alone. The mind can be sodden with lust or afflicted by hate. So when you find your mind in a less than beautiful state, know that that's just the condition of the mind. It's not personal. it's not because you've done something wrong, it's because you're a human being. This has been going on for thousands of years. And we're in the process of responding to it in a way that hopefully is more skillful. And so some of the words in the Dhammapada that suggesting we respond to this are we straighten the mind, we abandon the unwholesome, we guard the mind, we subdue the mind. So we respond to the mind once we have spent some time connecting with it, knowing it, acknowledging what is here. So not jumping over that first step. So we will move into the meditation. So we've been sitting for over half an hour. So if you feel like standing up and having a bit of a stretch, please do. Or running away. My body always loves a bit of a stretch. Maybe yours too. So most of us are in the position that we would like to be in for the meditation, making sure that you're listening to your body in making that choice. I just looked down and saw my Ugg boots. I thought my feet would like to be warm, so I'm putting them on. And so this attending to the body connects us, I think, with the kindness of the Metta Sutta chant. It's a kindness that we can direct to ourselves in this case. And it also is part of the 4 foundations of mindfulness in the first foundation, which is body. So having a real sense of how the body is, bringing our attention tonight into the body. And it might be that you sort of take up residence in the body in the sense of being aware of your posture, sitting in the body, being in the body, knowing how the body is sitting. Aware of the feet on the floor, probably, if you're on a chair, or if you're on a cushion, the buttocks and the knees on the floor. Or if you're lying down, it might be the back of the body stretched out on the floor. And bringing a caring, mindful attention to this body as best you can. As you bring the attention to the body, it's quite possible that you become aware of the breath. You can very happily include the breath in our mindfulness of body. This breath, so vital to life. and this body and this breath are always in the present moment. By knowing this body, by knowing this breath, are we breathing in or breathing out? We're establishing mindfulness, present moment awareness. And as you tune into the body, the breath, maybe just dropping that question related to the second foundation of mindfulness. Am I aware of anything in the body that is pleasant? Any body sensations that are pleasant? Scanning through the body. Am I aware of any sensations in the body that are unpleasant? Bringing the same ease, if we can, the same open acceptance, non-judgment, if that's possible, to the unpleasant as we do to the pleasant. At least see how you go. Scanning through the body, mindful of any unpleasant sensations. And then that more subtle question of, are there any neutral feelings in the body, neither pleasant nor unpleasant? Knowing the feeling tone that is present in the body right now, in this moment. Supporting our open, accepting, mindful awareness. And as we move into the third foundation of mindfulness, mindfulness of mind, just noticing the state of the mind. And you might observe that from the grounding of the body. So keeping some of the attention in the physicality of being here to help keep us in the present moment. And noticing how the mind is. And of course, I'm using mind, but it could be mind-heart. Going back to the phrases from the Dhammapada. Is your mind like a fish that's been pulled out of water and thrown on the land, throbbing and quivering in agitation? And if not, knowing that it's not, that's also really important to know when these hindrances aren't present. Is your mind seizing whatever it desires? Or maybe not. And again, knowing the presence or absence, both are important without judgment. Is it wandering off, restless? Or is it reasonably stable? However it is, acknowledging that this is how it is. It is like this. That can help us to remove any aversion that might arise in relation to a mind state. And all the time doing our best to cultivate a continuity of mindfulness, staying present. And that in itself, that continuity of mindfulness, is cultivating a beautiful mind. And as we stay in contact with the mind, observe the mind, and maybe notice that it gets clouded by something that's not beautiful. Let's see what we can learn from that, rather than running away with aversion and judgment. There's no need to condemn ourselves for being human. You might ask, what conditions gave rise to this mind state? What conditions might weaken it? Bringing mindfulness to the mind state is always wholesome. And I'll be quiet now, so continue the practice in whatever way is supportive for you today? Maybe when you observe the mind, what you notice is dullness, tiredness, fogginess. We're asked to know that state, not to judge it. How does it feel? What's the experience of in the words of the discourse, sloth and torpor, dullness, sleepiness? How does that feel? And the fourth foundation of mindfulness also asks us to look at the conditionality. What gives rise to that mind state? And what can help it to disappear? Whatever mind state you've got, whether it's one that is supportive of your practice or maybe not so useful, really know it And also inquire what gives rise to this mind state and what enables it to disappear. What are the conditions that keep it going? What are the conditions that help it to dissipate? It's quite a scientific process that we're being invited into, where we are the scientist, observing, learning, collecting data, but we're also the object of our inquiry, the object of our investigation. First person research. What can we learn? As best we can, bringing a warm heart to this scientific process that we're involved in. That warm heart supports us to stay with all the different types of mind states that can arise. If we can bring understanding and caring, realizing that this is just part of being a human being, that these different mind states will arise, the good, the bad, the ugly. Learning about what supports the beautiful mind states and how might we work not to continue the mind states that only cause us and others more suffering. As we come towards the end of this period of formal meditation, noticing how the mind is now, how the body is now, maybe also checking in on the feeling tone. Using the mindfulness that we've been cultivating to once again know this experience. Bringing the warm heart, no need to judge. How is the present moment? welcome back. Before I open it up to inviting comments or questions, reflections, I thought I'd just talk a little bit more about one other learning that arose from working with this mind on retreat. I mentioned in the first week that I love noble silence. I really appreciate that aspect of a retreat where we're able to spend the time observing what's going on inside and having no need to engage with others. I really love noble silence. But not everybody on the 1 month retreat, self-retreat that I was on, loved it as much as I do. And there were some people who talked at times. So even though I was happy that the judgmental mind wasn't as intense as it has been at times about people talking on retreat, so it was a little bit more subdued than it is. Still, I was noticing judging arising in relation to some of the people who were there and talked when I thought they shouldn't. And initially, I'd be noticing thoughts along the lines of, don't they know we're supposed to be in noble silence, you know? And look, what you're saying isn't even about the Dhamma, it's idle chat. So all different judgments coming up. And, you know, I didn't want to be strengthening judgment, aversion. I didn't want to be feeding that mind state. So I was looking for ways to help me reperceive the situation. And one of the things I tried was to remember that everybody suffers. No one escapes the unsatisfactory aspects of life. So remembering that the people that were on retreat have their own story, have their own struggles, that was useful. So remembering that. And then I took it a step further. I imagined that all the people who were talking were like callers to Lifeline. Lifeline in Australia is a crisis line. It's a suicide prevention line. And I volunteer at Lifeline. So I've talked to a lot of people who are ringing up because of suffering. And I find, I mean, that's one of the most heartwarming and beautiful and challenging things that I do. And I find that I'm able to, I think, probably bring my best self to that situation, to listen without judgment, to bring understanding. And so I was trying to evoke that orientation when imagining that all these people on retreat were callers to Lifeline. Certainly helped soften the judgment. And as I was thinking about, you know, everybody here is suffering. I remembered a quote that I had read that had been misattributed to Plato. And the quote goes, "Be kind. Everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle." I looked that quote up to when I was trying to find out whether in fact it was Plato who it came from, and it's not. In fact, it comes from a Scottish minister of the Free Church of Scotland, so a Christian minister. And I'm going to read out the whole quote that I found. If you're not on gallery view at the moment, if you're on speaker view, I invite you to put it on gallery view, because I want to encourage you to apply what I'm going to read out to all the people here. So this is the quote from, oh, I didn't write his name down. I think that's right. Anyway, he's a Scottish minister of the Free Church of Scotland. So this is what he wrote. This person beside me, or above me or below me, this person, these people around me, this person beside me, like me, has a hard fight with an unfavourable world, with strong temptations, with doubts and fears, with wounds of the past which have been covered over but which hurt when they are touched. And when we remember this, we move to deal kindly with them, to let them understand that we too are fighting a battle. And I thought when I read that, the insight into the human mind, very similar to some of the ideas that I read out from the Dhammapada. You know, we have doubts and fears and wounds that have been covered over, but which hurt. We have strong temptations. That quote reminds us of the shared experience of being human. And one of the things I really liked about it is that it shows that much of the wisdom that we study in Buddhism is also found in other great religions. And it was interesting because I was catching the train a few days ago and reading this little book of quotes from Ajahn Brahm. On the train, I don't want to read anything where I've got to concentrate too much, so a short snippet, it works well. And one of his quotes, he writes, "Let us be a maestro of the love within our religion. Then in having learned our religion well, we can go further and we can learn how to play, like members of an orchestra, with other religions in harmony." And I thought, thanks, Ajahn Brahm. You know, it's good to be reminded at any time of the value of harmony across what can sometimes appear to be a barrier that divides us. So that's pretty much what I was going to talk about tonight. Oh, I do have a little poem that I might share at the end. We'll see how we go if we have time. But if there is any comments, reflections on the content that we've looked at, or your meditation, any questions, they're very welcome at this point.
Can I ask a question?
Of course, Gloria.
The first thing I want to say is that I resonate with you a lot, like concerning people speaking during retreat, because I have that as well. Because sometimes I just I prefer not speaking, because I come to retreat for the silence, and then I hear people talking, and then I will be a little bit irritated. But then I also kind of I talk similar approach. I remind myself everybody regulate their emotion differently, because I do know some people not speaking for them is stressful. For me, it may not be that hard to not speak, but for some people, if they have to not speak for an extending period of time, it may be extra stressful for them. And then talking may be important strategy for them to regulate emotion. Although I do sometimes still get irritated, but that will bring a little bit perspective to it.
That's a great way of looking at it, yeah. And it's so true. I have this sense, on the introvert-extrovert continuum, introverts, when they're allowed to go on retreat and it's silence, it's like, party time! I don't have to talk to anybody. Whereas extroverts are like, I've signed up to go to hell. I mean, that's a huge generalization, but we will, as you say, experience the same condition very differently based on a number of different factors. Yeah, so very skillful way that you've just described of bringing understanding to something which some of us will find irritating. Yeah.
And the question I want to ask is because I'm mindfulness of the Dhamma is kind of if mindfulness of the mind or of the body, I think the body and the mind can stand as individual, more stand as an individual object for you to observe. But for a lot of the time, I feel the Dhamma is not really, I don't know how to say, it's not really kind of a separated entity. And then I just want to ask, is mindfulness of the Dhamma kind of like reflecting the Dhamma, or like you just do not think about it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I think I get a sense of its more ephemeral nature. It's not so concrete as, I can feel this body sitting on the chair. I can feel this itch and it's unpleasant. I really can identify that as something discrete to pay attention to. So the mindfulness of dharmas are inviting us to know what's going on in our mind and what supports them. So it's a much less straightforward. It's a much more complicated process, because when we start observing the mind, we can easily get caught in the thoughts, and it's harder to stand back and observe for a start. And it's asking us to bring a lot of nuance to what's happening in the mind, to firstly be able to identify what the mind state is and what might have given rise to it. Now, that might not be immediately apparent. For example, in the example I gave of having that agitated mind when I was on retreat, I never, and I didn't spend a lot of time trying to find out, but I never had a sense of it's agitated because ... We're invited in fourth foundation of mindfulness to see what gives rise to these mind states. Now, sometimes it can be very obvious, say in terms of sloth and torpor, dullness and tiredness in the mind. That could be because we haven't eaten, we haven't slept, and we've been working really hard. So it might be easy to understand what's given rise to that mind state, and we might know what will help that mind state to dissipate. But it could also be that dullness, sleepiness, tiredness is just the mind trying to escape from the boredom of being in the present moment. So it's not a straightforward investigation that we're being invited into. And it takes, I think, a lot of practice to become familiar with the mind states, to know our mind and what helps it to be in a positive, wholesome state, to know what helps it to be in, diminish the unwholesome states. So it's a more complicated, multifaceted, if you like, more multifaceted approach.
Just want to like, so is that kind of means like you observe suffering and you try to observe the origin of suffering, and then you get to know the end of the suffering and what leads to the end of the suffering, and then you just observe the process as a kind of practice.
So it could be, yes. And certainly in some versions of the Satipatthana Sutta, included in the fourth foundation of mindfulness is the Four Noble Truths. And so we know that in the Four Noble Truths, particularly, we are asked to know suffering, know the causes of suffering, and know the way out of suffering. So the example you gave could well and truly be within that. Yes. Yeah. I think
Okay, thank you.
that's a skillful thing to investigate. Sometimes just naming that a particular mind state is suffering is useful, because we can be caught in it without identifying that and knowing that the staying in it and the feeding it, because often we will feed a mind state which is unskillful. We will put fuel on it, we will go back over it, we will add another argument about why they shouldn't have done that. We will rehearse all of that suffering over and over and over again. So the identification that actually what I'm doing is suffering, and deepening the likelihood that I will come back here again, because the more we repeat something, the more we rehearse something, we're just strengthening those neural pathways. What we practice is what we get good at. Practice worrying, I'll get good at being a warrior. Practice loving, we get good at being a lover. Yeah. Bob?
I did a 3-day retreat, well, many years ago now. I can't stand the silence. I need to talk. Yeah, I don't think it was quite the mind state you described, but I even caught myself, I think, several hours before the Sunday knockoff. I had to sneak up to the car park and turn the ABC on in the car. And yet, they stuck me into isolation when I had my heart attack and had that virus. And 4 days I was in there on my own. And it was bloody lovely.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what changed or why. Probably reading about Ajahn Chah and listening to one too many Ajahn Brahms. But yeah, years ago, I couldn't handle it. But then I'm in hospital having had a heart attack with a virus. And I thought it was absolute bliss.
And often that would be quite a scary situation where we would want to have some support from other human beings. So that feels to me like doubly difficult than just being on retreat, which you've chosen to, but having had a heart attack, being put in isolation. That for most people would be even more intense in terms of the silence, Bob. So all those bloody Ajahn Chah and Ajahn Brahm talks and books, maybe they've reconditioned. They've been, well, of course they have, not maybe, of course they have been adding new conditions to the mind-heart. They have been. Coming here, we are reconditioning the mind-heart. We are adding new conditions in, which make it more likely, just even if it's only just a little bit, that we'll respond with more space, with more openness, with more acceptance to the stuff that comes up. But that's a fascinating change that you observed there, and feels like something to take some pleasure from. How good. How good.
Yeah, it was very strange to receive my first visitors. I actually, to some degree, I guess I resented the intrusion. The nurses didn't like coming in, obviously. They had to get into full gear. What do we call it? PPE. They had to get into full PPE before they could come into the room. And of course, when they finally cleared me and said, you're okay, and cleared everybody that came in, as long as they didn't have a virus, they were allowed in. Yeah, I actually resented it. I wanted to be alone.
Yeah.
So it was kind of strange.
So you've been completely reconditioned. Though who knows, in the next situation, next 3-day retreat you go on.
Yeah, okay. Maybe.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm just feeling into having had a 3-day retreat that was so difficult, that can then create some apprehension about the potential of doing it again.
Yeah.
Who knows? Who knows? Anyway, I've just noticed that you've put in, can I write in the chat what sutta I'm reading from? So it's the Satipatthana Sutta.
Yes, please. I'd like to. Oh, yeah. Thank you. I'd like to put that on the blurb when I do the publish.
Okay.
Thank you, Kathryn.
Yeah. And ditto to Sky about the beautiful chant of the Metta Sutta by Gloria and the little intro. Yep, very lovely. As was yours last week, Sky. It was a really present, lovely reading of the Metta Sutta last week. So thank you. Probably got time for one more person before we sign off, if there is somebody that would like to add something. Pinder.
I can't mute. It's just a couple of funny incidents about this silence on the retreats.
Yep.
First one, I went to a weekend retreat some time ago now. And I was talking to a chap I know who's a clinical psychologist, I think. So I just mentioned to him, I said, I've just been. He said, how did you find it? I said, it was okay, because I don't like sitting next to a person at the start of a development course and share your experience, and then they have to share it with us.
All those icebreaker stuffs.
That's just a waste of half an hour, so they can say, oh, we've done that. Anyway, so so how was that? I said, oh, it was very good, lovely. I didn't have to do any of that. So he said, my niece and her friend went a few weeks ago, and on Friday night after the meal, the silence starts. And he said they lasted half an hour and they got into the car and headed off to Perth. I said, well, there you go. And another 3-day one, I think. That's right. It was a 3-day one. And I'd just come out of some isolated spot at the retreat center. And I could hear some voices around the corner. And they were talking about work. That can't be. So I came around the corner, and it's John Brown talking to a couple of workers. They were talking about the work that needed to be done urgently. So I normally don't think quick enough like that. So all I could do was I just walk past.
Yes.
So they said, oh, that's good.
Your comment, Pinder, reminded me of some quote which I'm only going to mash, but something like, when the people left within half an hour, something like, all the problems of the world come because we are not able to sit alone in a room with ourselves. And, that quote that I read from, there's all sorts of reasons we might not be able to sit in a room alone by ourselves. But the quote that I read from the Scottish minister, he names, and I'm just looking for it now, he names doubts and fears, temptations, wounds of the past which have been covered over but which hurt when they're touched. There's all sorts of things going on below the surface that we might not even have an idea of, that when we get to be by ourselves in silence can bubble up a little bit more and say, hello, you've forgotten me, I'd like some attention. Yeah. So I'm going to finish now with a poem, and it's called Peace in This Moment Without Judgment, and it's by Dorothy Hunt. She writes, do you think peace requires an end to war, or tigers only eating vegetables? Does peace require an absence from your boss, your spouse, yourself? Do you think peace will come some other place than here, some other time than now, in some other heart than yours? Peace is this moment without judgment. That is all. This moment in the heart space, where everything that is welcome. Peace in this moment without thinking that it should be some other way, that you should feel some other thing, that your life should unfold according to your plans. Peace in this moment without judgment, this moment in the heart space where everything that is welcome. So I can paste that and put that in the chat if you're interested in having a look. So thanks all. It's been really an honour to have been able to be here with you for the last 4 weeks. It's certainly deepened my practice as a result of thinking about each of these weeks and what I might talk about and how I might come. And I hope there's been something of use for you, even if only a tiny little snippet over these last 4 weeks, or whichever week you've come to. So I look forward to being with you next week as a participant. I think we've got another 2 weeks with Rain's lay presenters. Yeah, peace, Bob is saying too. and then the monks will be back in the third week from today. So thanks again, and go well.